So there is one huge thing that business buyers don't think about when they buy a business. And what's that got to do with flying a plane? Well, I'll tell you. So that huge reason makes it obvious which business to buy, a large business or a small business. And I'll tell you about the plane flying later on. So choosing the wrong size business, well, that can make or break your business success. That can be the difference between owning a successful business and owning a, well, not so successful one. But how can that be? So what was that one thing that we talked about? What was that one thing that buyers don't consider? Well, that's business risk. That's the risk involved with owning the business. Sure, they think in terms of how much can I risk buying the business, but they don't think in terms of the risk involved if something goes wrong. So what happens if you buy the business and things don't go according to plan? That's the risk I'm talking about, and that's the risk that most buyers don't consider. So I've been a business broker for a long time. I've sold hundreds of businesses, and I've seen firsthand how buying the wrong size business can impact the long-term success of a business owner's life cycle. I've seen people buy the wrong size business thinking they were mitigating risk when in fact they were absolutely wrong. So when you buy a business, you take on debt. Now, most people borrow to buy a business. It's pretty normal. Now, usually those people will own a house, a home, and they'll have a mortgage on that. So that's more debt, isn't it? Debt on the business, debt on the mortgage of their house. They'll also have to live. They'll have to fund their lifestyle. So they buy a business that's going to help fund their lifestyle, help fund their mortgage repayments, help pay for the kids' school fees, pay for the holidays, and generally pay for their ability to live. So the income from that business that they're buying funds their life. It funds their ability to live. So any mistake in running your business will cost you money. Now, it'll cost you money two ways. It might be reduced revenue, in other words, sales go down, or it might be increased expenses. But either way, you will have less money at the end of the month to fund that lifestyle. There'll be less money at the end of the month to pay the mortgage, to pay the loans, school fees, run the car, and generally live. So hang on, what has that got to do with being a pilot? I mentioned that earlier. Well, many years ago when I was learning to fly, my instructor told me that I had to make room for my mistakes. Now, like any budding pilot, I wanted to do a loop, I wanted to do a roll, stall turns, all the fun stuff that you wanted to do in an aircraft. Now, if you make a mistake when you're flying an aircraft, things happen. Generally, the plane will fall out of the sky and you'll hit the ground. Now, hitting the ground when you're learning to fly is something that you definitely don't want to do as a trainee pilot. So the instructor used to say to me, whenever you're doing anything, make sure that you're 3 mistakes high. That way, I can try something out, I can make a mistake, make another mistake, make another mistake, and still not hit the ground. And as I said, hitting the ground is not something you want to do. So he always taught me that when you're doing something, when you're learning to fly and you're trying a new maneuver, be 3 mistakes high before you try that maneuver. Now, business is no different. You need to have room to make mistakes. You need to have room for error. So what has that got to do with buying a business and the size of the business? Well, it's quite simple. Buying a big business is a huge advantage over buying a small business. Now, what do I mean by that? How does that work? Let me tell you. So a new business is the same as learning to fly. There's a little bit of risk there, sure, and you need to learn. And by learning, you will make mistakes. So you need a business big enough to allow you to make mistakes. So you need a business 3 mistakes high, if you like. So you'll buy your new business, you'll make a little bit of mistake in revenue, a little bit of mistake in the bottom line, and it won't hurt you if that business has enough resilience, has enough resistance, and has enough resources within the business. Now, small businesses simply do not have that margin for error. The larger the business, the more margin for error, the better it is for you in the long term. It allows you to make mistakes, but still afford to run the business pay your bills, pay your debts, and live out of the business while you go through that learning curve of a new business. Because of this, I always suggest that you buy the biggest business that you can afford to buy. Big means more margin for error, less room for mistakes to be fatal. Remember, buy a business 3 mistakes high and you're liable to be more successful in the long run.